You are standing in Boots. You pick up a razor. The packaging is pink. The grip is the same. The blade count is the same. The manufacturer is the same. You check the price. Then you check the razor sitting on the shelf beside it. The packaging is blue. The price is lower. Same product, different customer. You put the pink razor back, or you do not. Either way, you have just made a choice inside a pricing structure that 42,000 people signed a petition to challenge. The structure is still there. That is what this story is about. You pick up a razor in Boots. The packaging is pink. The blade count is listed on the front. The grip is molded the same way. The brand name is identical to the one on the shelf beside it. The shelf beside it has blue packaging. The price on the blue packaging is lower, and not slightly lower, measurably lower, on a product the manufacturer makes the same way, in the same facility, to the same specification. You are paying more because the packaging is pink. That is not a perception, that is a price list. The term for this is the pink tax. It is not a statutory levy, and it does not appear as a line item on any receipt. It is a pricing differential applied systematically to products marketed at women when those products are functionally identical to equivalents marketed at men. The differential is not confined to razors. It has been documented across disposable blades, shower gel, deodorant, shaving foam, and moisturizer. The common feature in each case is not the formulation. The formulation is frequently the same. The common feature is the customer the packaging is designed to reach, and the price that customer is asked to pay for reaching back. In 2023, that differential became formally visible at Boots. A petition was filed. The claim was specific. Boots was charging women more than men for products that were, in material terms, identical. The petition gathered 42,000 signatures. That number is not symbolic. At 42,000, a petition has crossed the threshold from individual grievance into documented public record. It represents 42,000 separate decisions by 42,000 separate consumers to attach their name to a finding they regarded as accurate and worth registering. Boots responded. The response acknowledged the concern. It did not acknowledge that the pricing structure was indefensible. What it offered instead was a review, a commitment to examine the differential and language that positioned the gap as an area for improvement rather than a practice that required immediate correction. The distinction between those two framings is not semantic. A commitment to review places the burden of proof back on the customer. It suggests the evidence already assembled by 42,000 people is a starting point for investigation rather than a conclusion. The regulatory position made that framing available. UK consumer law does not prohibit differential pricing by demographic. There is no statutory instrument that prevents a retailer from charging women more than men for a functionally identical product. The Competition and Markets Authority has powers to act against misleading pricing and unfair commercial practices, but a consistent price differential applied openly and listed on a label does not automatically trigger those powers. The price is visible. The customer can see it. The argument available to the retailer is that visibility is a defense. That argument fails at the point of comparison. It assumes the customer is standing in the aisle with both products in front of them, performing the comparison in real time. Most customers are not. Most customers are reaching for the product that is marketed at them in the section of the store organized around them, at the price listed on the shelf in front of them. The cross-aisle comparison that would expose the differential requires the customer to already suspect the differential exists. Boots organized the store in a way that made that suspicion unlikely. The men's products were not on the shelf beside the women's products. The comparison was not invited. The strongest version of Boots' position, the one their communications gestured toward without fully articulating, is that the products are not identical, that the formulation differs, that the fragrance profile differs, that the development cost of a product marketed at women reflects investment in specific consumer research, packaging design, and ingredient choices that do not apply to the male equivalent. That argument has a surface plausibility. It also has a specific problem. In the cases that generated the petition, the manufacturer was the same. In some instances, the formulation was the same. The packaging was the variable. The price difference was not explained by a different product. It was explained by a different customer. What changed after 42,000 signatures and a public review commitment was limited. Some prices were adjusted. The adjustments were real. The pricing architecture that had produced the differential, the mechanism by which a product marketed at women was priced above its functional equivalent, was not dismantled, it was trimmed. The petition had identified a pattern. The response addressed individual instances of that pattern. The structure that generated those instances remained in place, available to produce new ones. Boots had a second mechanism for the same outcome. It did not operate in the razor aisle. It operated in the customer's wallet every time they tapped their card. The Advantage card is not a peripheral feature of the Boots shopping experience. It is the primary relationship between Boots and its most loyal customers. Launched in 1997 and carrying tens of millions of registered holders, the card is the channel through which Boots communicates deals, accumulates customer data, and signals that the relationship between the retailer and the customer is reciprocal. The signal the card sends is specific. It says, because you shop here, you receive more than the standard customer. Your loyalty is recognized. The deal on the app, the points on the receipt, the member price displayed beside the non-member price, each of these is a communication. What they communicate collectively is that the Advantage card holder is better informed and better served than the customer who simply walks in off the street. That communication is the product. The card is how Boots sells the idea that it is on the customer's side, which, examine that idea in 2025. The methodology was specific. Approximately 700 Advantage card deals were surveyed across a defined period. Each deal was assessed against the reference price used to establish the saving, the was price from which the discounted now price was calculated. The test applied was the standard that UK pricing regulations and Advertising Standards Authority guidance require. A reference price must reflect a genuine previous selling price sustained for a meaningful period before it can be used as the baseline for a promotional claim. A was £12, now £8 label is a representation. The representation is that the product was actually sold at £12 for long enough that £12 constitutes a real price rather than an inflated anchor. 17% of the deals surveyed did not meet that standard. At 700 deals, 17% is not a rounding error. It is not the tail of a distribution in which a small number of edge cases fail a technical requirement while the bulk of the scheme operates honestly. It is 1 in every 6 deals systematically across the range. The number means that a customer engaging with Advantage card promotions in the period surveyed had approximately a 1 in 6 chance of acting on a deal whose reference price had no reliable grounding in Boots' actual prior selling behavior. The mechanism that makes this possible is information asymmetry. Boots holds the complete pricing history of every product it sells. The customer holds the label in front of them and the deal notification on their app. The customer has no independent means of verifying that the was price was ever a real price. They are extending trust, and the trust that the loyalty relationship is supposed to have earned to a representation they cannot check. The card is precisely the instrument designed to generate that trust. A customer who has accumulated points over years, who receives personalized offers, who has been told repeatedly that their loyalty is valued, is not approaching the deal label with skepticism. They are approaching it with the confidence that the relationship licenses. What the which finding establishes is that the confidence was, in 17% of surveyed cases, misplaced. Not because the product was poor, not because the saving was zero. The saving might have been real in absolute terms. The now price might genuinely have been lower than what Boots had charged at some point in the recent past. The problem is narrower and more structural than that. The reference price was not a real ceiling. It was a number selected to make the gap between was and now look larger than the customer's actual saving relative to normal trading prices. The deal was anchored to a fiction. The loyalty card was the delivery mechanism. Boots did not publicly revise the Advantage Card deal framework following the Which publication. The finding entered the record. The scheme continued. The card remained the primary customer relationship tool, the primary promotional channel, and the primary mechanism by which Boots communicated that its most loyal customers were its most valued ones. A Which finding is not a regulatory enforcement action. It is a documented public record of a specific practice at a specific scale. What converts a finding into a revision is either regulatory pressure or a calculation by the retailer that the reputational cost of continuation exceeds the commercial value of the practice. That calculation, at the time of writing, had not produced a revision. There is a pattern forming. It is not yet named. It will be. The first strand was a price differential applied to a customer who was unlikely to make the comparison that would expose it. The second strand was a promotional framework that made a saving look larger than it was, delivered through a loyalty mechanism designed to suppress the skepticism that would otherwise interrogate it. Both strands operate below the level of casual consumer scrutiny. Both rely on the customer not having access to the reference point that would reframe what they are being shown. The third strand operates the same way. It requires a border. In 2024, documented price comparisons between Boots stores in the Republic of Ireland and equivalent Boots stores in Scotland showed the same product listed at prices that in some cases approached double the Scottish equivalent. The product was identical. The company was the same. The supply chain, in many instances, was the same. The price was not. A moisturizer available in an Edinburgh Boots for a given amount was available in a Dublin Boots for a figure that, once currency conversion was applied, was close to twice as much. The figure was not an estimate. It was a documented comparison, conducted on specific products, at specific store locations, at a specific point in time. Boots and comparable retailers offer a standard architecture of explanation for cross-border price differentials. The components are familiar. VAT rates differ between the Republic of Ireland and the United Kingdom, and the Irish standard rate sits above the UK rate for relevant product categories. Distribution costs differ. Local market conditions differ. The cost of operating retail premises in Dublin relative to Edinburgh reflects different commercial property markets, different employment cost structures, and different regulatory environments. Each component of this explanation is real. None of them is fabricated. The arithmetic, however, does not hold at the scale of the documented gap. VAT differential accounts for a portion of a cross-border price difference. Distribution cost differentials account for a further portion. When those legitimate variables are modeled against the observed gap, when the explainable fraction is subtracted from the total differential. A residual remains. That residual is not accounted for by logistics or taxation. It is accounted for by the structural condition that the Irish customer is in. They are buying from a retailer with no direct competitor offering the same branded experience within convenient reach. That condition has a name in competition economics. It is not monopoly in the statutory sense. Boots does not hold a dominant market position across Irish retail in the way that would trigger a Competition and Consumer Protection Commission investigation automatically. But it functions as a localized monopoly of brand experience. The customer in Dublin who wants a Boots product in a Boots store with the Boots Advantage card applied has one option. The customer in Edinburgh has the same option and several others within the same retail environment. The pricing reflects that difference, not the cost difference, the choice difference. This is the coldest part of the entire story. The pink tax strand required a petition of 42,000 signatures to become publicly documented. The Advantage card strand required which to survey 700 deals and publish the finding. The border pricing strand requires the customer to already be the kind of person who checks prices across jurisdictions, who has a reason to make the comparison, the time to conduct it, and access to the data that makes it possible. The customer in the Dublin Boots, standing at the shelf with the moisturizer in hand has none of those things. They have a price. The price is the price because they have no way of knowing it is not. Each strand, taken individually, has an explanation available to it. The pink tax differential reflects product development costs and marketing investments specific to the female consumer segment, or so the argument runs. The Advantage card reference prices reflect a promotional architecture that operates within the bounds of what retailers have historically been permitted to do, pending clearer regulatory guidance. The cross-border gap reflects the genuine cost variables of operating in two different commercial and regulatory environments. Each explanation, offered in isolation, has a surface plausibility that would satisfy a casual assessment. The problem is the simultaneity. Boots did not accidentally produce a pricing differential disadvantaging women in its razor aisle, while separately, by coincidence, constructing a loyalty scheme whose reference prices overstated the saving in 17% of surveyed cases, while also independently arriving at cross-border price gaps that exceed what cost variables can account for. The probability of arriving at all three outcomes through independent decisions, each one uninfluenced by a shared underlying logic, is not a matter of opinion. Three strands, each one identifying a customer with limited access to the comparison that would reframe what they are being shown, each one pricing toward the ceiling that limitation allows. That is not a design accident. That is a design brief. The resolution of each strand followed the same shape. The pink tax petition generated a review commitment and selective price adjustments. The pricing architecture that produced the differential was not restructured. The which finding on Advantage card deals entered the public record. The card scheme was not revised. The border pricing gap was documented in price comparison reporting. No revision to the Irish pricing structure was announced. In each case, the specific instance that drew the specific scrutiny received the minimum response sufficient to absorb the scrutiny. The underlying mechanism that generated the instance was not the subject of the response. The mechanism continued. That outcome is not neutral. A review commitment that adjusts selected prices without restructuring the differential is an outcome that costs something. Reputational exposure, some margin sacrifice on the adjusted lines, but costs less than dismantling the model. A which finding that does not produce a regulatory enforcement action is a finding that has been absorbed. A documented border pricing gap that generates a news cycle and then settles back into the background is a gap that has been survived. What converts any of these outcomes into a structural revision is a calculation, when the cost of the practice, measured in regulatory risk, reputational damage, and litigation exposure, exceeds the commercial value of continuing it. That threshold across all three strands has not been reached. The entity with the clearest authority to move that threshold is the Competition and Markets Authority. Its powers extend to misleading pricing practices, unfair commercial terms, and conduct that disadvantages consumers through information asymmetry. The Advantage card reference pricing finding sits closest to the existing boundary of those powers. A sustained pattern of misleadingly presented reference prices documented at scale across a major loyalty scheme with tens of millions of cardholders is the category of conduct the CMA's Consumer Protection Framework was designed to address. Whether the which finding is sufficient to trigger a formal investigation and whether a formal investigation would produce an enforcement action are questions the public record does not yet answer. What the public record establishes is that the finding exists, the scale is documented, and the practice continues. What Boots paid nothing for is the part of this story that does not appear in any petition, any survey, or any price comparison report. It does not appear because it is the precondition for everything that followed, not a feature of any individual strand. The customer who reaches for the pink razor without checking the blue one beside it is not making a free choice. They are making the choice the store layout intended them to make. The Advantage card holder who acts on a deal anchored to a reference price that was never a real ceiling is not exercising informed consumer judgment. They are extending the trust the loyalty relationship was designed to generate. The customer in Dublin who pays the Irish price without knowing the Scottish price exists is not failing to do adequate research. They are operating inside an information environment that Boots constructed and that Boots benefits from. In each case, the customer's limitation, the comparison they did not make, the reference point they did not have, the border they did not cross, is not an unfortunate feature of the transaction. It is the mechanism of it. You are back in Boots. The razor is in your hand. The pink packaging is the same. The price on the shelf label is the same. If you have an Advantage card, the deal notification on your app is the same. If you are in Dublin, the price you're about to pay is the same. Nothing about the store has changed. What has changed is the frame around it. You know now that the differential in the razor aisle was documented and challenged and selectively adjusted and left structurally intact. You know that the deal on your app was anchored in 1 in every 6 surveyed cases to a price that was not a real price. You know that the figure on the Irish shelf reflects not just the cost of getting the product there, but the cost of being the customer who had nowhere else to go. The packet did not change, the store did not change, the model did not change, your understanding of it did.